On average, think about this, NFL players will spend 3 to 5 hours every single day of the week in the regular season working out. My son asked me this question the other day. We were talking about football. He's been collecting trading cards and we've just been talking a ton about sports lately. And he looks at me and he goes, "Hey Dad, do you think that right now if the Seattle Seahawks called you up and said, we want you to come play," he goes, "do you think you could head out onto the field and keep up with these guys?" And you can imagine that I kind of giggled a little bit because my answer, obviously, I said, "Easton, look, buddy, these guys are trained professionals. There is no way that I would be able to head out onto the field and keep up with these athletes. These are high-level guys. They train for this stuff day in and day out." Here's what it made me think about. As we've been talking about discipleship, what discipleship is, what it means for you and I in our everyday lives, there's this reality that it can be super overwhelming. I want to go back and look at Matthew 4 again. This instance, if you remember from the last episode, where Jesus shows up, he walks down to the Sea of Galilee and he sees these two guys down there. And they're getting their nets ready. They're getting the boats ready. They were fishermen. That was what their identity was. That was what they did for a living. And Jesus kind of enters into the scene and really flips their world upside down with one question, with one invitation. Matthew chapter 4:19, it says this. Jesus goes to these guys and he says, "Come and follow me." And I want you to not miss this. He says, "And I will make you fishers of men." So here's what Jesus was doing. When he makes that statement, when he asks that question, he says, "Come and follow me and I will make you, I will turn you into fishers of men." Essentially what Jesus was doing is he's inviting these guys to come on a journey with him. Now, don't miss this truth. A lot of times we get stuck in this broken belief system that unless I can do it perfectly, or unless I can look just like that person that I look up to, or even sometimes unless I can look exactly like Jesus, then it's really not worth doing. So when Jesus says, "Come with me, follow me, and I will make you into something, I'm going to turn you into something," what he was saying is, I want to invite you on a journey. So what does it look like? Well, first of all, Jesus says, "I want you to come and follow me." And he says, I want you to leave your nets behind. Now, you got to remember, these guys are fishermen. This is their livelihood. Their whole identity would have been wrapped up in their success with a fishing net, whether or not they were doing a good job, making enough money to provide for their family. And so when Jesus steps in and he says, "Hey, I want you to leave your nets behind," that wasn't just about their schedule. He's actually saying, I want to become the priority in your life. I want to become the most important thing in your life because I've got major plans for you. I want to do incredible things for you. If you've put your faith in Jesus Christ, if you confess him as your Lord and Savior, did you know that his plan for you is that you would become a disciple maker? Here's the reality though. That invitation that we see in Matthew chapter 4, that's not the destination. Don't get this mixed up. The invitation is not the destination. It's actually as if Jesus is kind of saying, "Hey, I'm inviting you to the starting line because I've got these plans for you, but we've got a long ways to go." His initial invitation was, I want you to just leave your identity in fishing or whatever your identity is in. I want you to leave that behind and I want you to come and make me the priority in your life. That's where you and I have to start. If we're going to be disciples and we're going to make disciples, we're going to fulfill the Great Commission, it starts with this. Are we willing to leave behind whatever priority that took the place of Jesus in our lives for so long and say, "Lord, you're number one in my life"? That's the first thing that we have to be willing to wrap our minds and our hearts around. Secondly is this, we have to recognize that being disciples and making disciples is not a sprint, it's a marathon. That really applies to this conversation today. Think about this. What were Peter and Andrew thinking about when the Messiah comes and invites them into this relationship and says, I want you to come and follow me, and I'm going to make you into something great? What do you think they were thinking about that night when they laid their heads down on their pillow or wherever they laid their heads? Can you imagine they're thinking, man, I bet tomorrow we're going to go do incredible things. But here's the reality. What did Jesus do? He looked at him and he said, I want you to sit back, observe, and just watch what I do. I want you to watch how I engage people. I want you to watch how I love people, how I have compassion for people. If we'll step into this journey with Jesus, he's going to stretch us and he's going to do things in us and through us that I promise you never even imagined. You're going to begin to experience God's design for your life. Remember in episode 1, hopefully you caught that, we talked about this idea that God made everything. We went back to Genesis and we said that God created everything with intentionality, and he put his image in you and I. We're actually image bearers. The imago Dei, the image of God is in us. And if that's true, and Jesus calls us to make disciples, then isn't it true that as we walk that out, that we're walking out the very image that God put in us? My hope is this. My hope is that God would be doing something in your heart. And the deeper we get into this series, the more convinced and convicted you would become that above all things, Jesus Christ needs to be the priority in your life. And as you grow closer to him, you'll continue to grow closer into this understanding that we're called, designed, created, built by God to make disciples.